He is a Las Vegas staff writer for the Sporting Tribune. We have the pleasure in welcoming Will Despart onto Hoopsology. Welcome, Will.
Thank you, guys. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining the show. Really appreciate it. You had a very active weekend this weekend as following your social media. You covered the Aces when they played the Liberty, and then you covered the Gervonta Davis Frank Martin fight. I'm a big combat sports fan, so that caught my attention immediately. Can you kind of talk about the vibe of having a WNBA team in Vegas, and also you have all these different sporting events, especially during a fight night? I've been in Vegas for multiple fights. Can you kind of talk about that dynamic in terms of there was any buzz? If people were going to the Aces game and the fight, kind of that dynamic within the fan base in Vegas.
Well, it was funny. At the Aces game, you could see LeBron, you could see Damian Lillard, John Wall, Savannah was there. So my presumption was they were there for the fight too. And I saw John Wall at the fight. I didn't see LeBron and everyone else, but I did see Steven Jackson from the Spurs back in the day, Stack. So a bunch of celebrities there that were at both games. As far as the atmosphere in the city, I always say it's the greatest sports city in the world. I mean, there's only one city in the world you can get a huge boxing fight like Gervonta Davis on Saturday, and then have a box office attraction like the Aces in the same city a mile apart. It's a 5-minute car ride. It's unbelievable.
So can you talk about just the fan bases of the Ace, because it's the Aces, because we usually like to delve into different fan bases within the WNBA and the NBA and what makes them unique compared to the rest of the teams in the league. So with the Aces themselves, the back-to-back winners of the title, a lot of great facilities, hardcore fan base, awesome team, great owner. Can you kind of just talk about the fans' connection to this team specifically?
Yeah. I mean, the fan base is incredibly passionate, and this city is so much behind them. It's unbelievable. Mark Davis is the Raiders owner. He also owns the Aces, and he's giving them every bit as much resources as he's giving the Raiders. Like, he's not cutting it short. He really sees the Aces as like his passion project, and I think a lot of the Raiders fans and towns have gotten behind that. I mean, if you like one Vegas team, you like them all. This is a city where it's very tribal. Everybody, if you're from Vegas, it's kind of like Vegas against the world, and people take that to heart. And you kind of see that from other fan bases too. They kind of see Vegas as kind of like an enemy sometimes, even in hockey, like the Golden Knights. So they see it scandalous maybe with the gambling in town and everything. But I think we take pride in that, and we kind of take pride in being the enemy. And yeah, it's just how Vegas is.
So fill us in on what's going on with the Aces so far this season. You've seen all over Twitter and I think across the country and maybe across the globe with more eyeballs on the WNBA this season. Obviously, there's kind of like the Caitlin Clark boom, among other factors contributing to those ratings. What's going on with the Aces? Because I think people are seeing like these are back-to-back champions. Why are they 6-6 right now? Can you kind of give us a synopsis to catch the fans up on, if they haven't been watching, what's been going on with the Aces? What are maybe some struggles they've been dealing with in route to 6-6 record?
I think it's a couple things. I think one, the rest of the league is caught up. The rest of the league has the depth to handle them now. The Storm are a much better team. The Lynx are a championship contender. The Sun are still a championship contender. Obviously, the Liberty have improved. So, I mean, those teams are all better this season than they were last year. And then I also think it's an issue with their drive. Like, I hate to say it, but it seems like they've kind of entered this season content. I mean, you've heard Becky Hammon kind of allude to that in the press conferences. Like, she said from day one they didn't have the edge. And, I mean, the way the league is getting better, this rookie class isn't going to be the last rookie class that's cutting edge, that like has dominant talent that enters this league. It's only going to get better. So you can't lose your edge, and they've seemingly lost it.
Interesting. That's an interesting thing for a coach to say. Do you think the intent there from Becky was, Coach Hammond, was to fire up the team and try and recultivate that edge?
In a way, yeah, but Becky's also just very honest. She's going to tell it how it is no matter what, whether it's to get the team behind her or get the team back to where they need to be, or whether it's just what she feels like what she feels represents the team in the moment. She's not going to shy away from any of that, and she's going to be very honest.
So Chelesa Gray's been out of the lineup, and a lot of pundits have said when she returns, the Aces, that's going to really change their fortunes. But from what you're talking, it seems like it goes deeper than this missing Gray from the lineup. So, what do you anticipate when she comes back? Do you think they still will have some kind of things to battle and kind of this complacency, even if she returns to the lineup?
There's definitely going to be some things to battle. It's definitely still going to be an uphill climb. Obviously, she's the best point guard in the game, so when you put her in the mix, like they've also alluded to in press conference how when you bake a cake or something, you're missing an ingredient, the cake's going to come out pretty bad, and the cake is coming out pretty bad. Now, if you add Chelsea Gray to that, I don't think it makes them the number one finals contender right away. I think they're still behind 3 or 4 teams for that, but I think you can expect a pretty decent improvement because they really don't have like the engine behind their team right now, and it's very obvious. They have Kelsey Plum running the point a lot of games, and as great of a scorer as she can be at times, when she's the main focal point of your offense running the point, she's not very efficient, and it's really showing.
Now, that's very interesting. I want to focus on Asia Wilson, even though I think the Aces have been disappointing compared to their previous season. She is having a phenomenal year. For those that may not know, can you kind of enlighten our audience into the competitive spirit of Asia Wilson? You're going to see the emotion. I think in one of her most recent post-game press conferences, just the passion she has for not only winning, but just for her squad and what the team can do, not only this year, but for future years to come. She is just in for the long haul. I don't really see that in other sports with athletes being passionate about their franchise, but I think with Asia, she really is a perfect example of that because he kind of allude to just kind of her connection to not only her teammates, but to the Aces specifically.
Well, she just wants to win so bad, and she wants to do it for the city, and she wants to do it for her teammates. And she said that she doesn't care if she averages 12 and 10 or 28 and 10. She just wants to win, and she just wants to get more victories for the city, more titles for the city, and for her teammates. Because she's obviously the leader of the team, the focal point of the team. She's the one whose legacy is being uplifted the most, but she's also uplifting the legacies of Jackie Young and Kelsey Plum and Chelsea Gray, who may not be like these A-list WNBA players that they are now. And yeah, I mean,
so with games for, I guess I'll take it 2 ways, both for the Aces specifically and for Las Vegas at large. One of the narratives you always heard, perhaps years ago at this point, with rolling out like the Raiders in Vegas and bringing the Aces and the Golden Knights to Vegas. Oh, they're going to struggle to have a home court advantage because it's Vegas, it's transient. You'll have a lot of people coming to games as part of their travel plans to Vegas. Have you noticed if that seems to be a legitimate thing compared to other sporting events that you're seeing? Or do you feel like Vegas is getting a pretty strong home advantage depending on the franchise?
I mean, I actually think they're getting a strong home advantage. Like, I think the opposite is true, is like how they were, like the fear was that it would be all transplants and not locals coming to the games. I feel like Aces and Knights games specifically are full of locals and full of people who are coming from Henderson and Summerlin to the Strip who don't come to the Strip regularly. They're an attraction, and they're an attraction more so for locals than I'd say the Raiders at this point, because
Wow.
I mean, they feel like a Vegas team. They feel like they were built here, born here, even though they weren't. The Aces weren't. They'd come from San Antonio, obviously. The Knights were. But the Raiders, they don't really have a Vegas identity yet. The Aces and the Knights do.
Interesting. And do you think that's because there's so much history in California, whether you're looking at LA or Oakland with the Raiders? Do you think it's just kind of because they're that transplant and there's history built in there?
That's exactly the reason. You're never going to take the Raiders are always going to be California's team. They're the biggest team in California to this day, over the Rams, over the Chargers.
Yeah.
The Niners might have a slight edge now because they're gone, but that was a Raiders state. And for a lot of people in that state, it's going to always be a Raiders state. And Vegas is close enough where they can still kind of claim it, but it's always going to be California's team.
Yeah, it's so interesting because you bring up, great points from earlier about specific kind of things that fans and the state and the city of Las Vegas can latch onto. And in a way, when you bring up like gambling culture and things like that, you'd think the Raiders thing would kind of stick with that maybe or mesh well with it. But it's a good point that there's just a lot of history back there in California.
I also think a lot of the cliches like about Vegas aren't true with the locals. Like the opposite, like I said, is true. Like a lot of the locals here, and myself included, like we shy away from the Strip when there's nothing going on. Like I don't want to deal with the tourists. I don't want to go to downtown and deal with all the police and all like the security down there. It gets madhouse. So I'll stay home, go to the arts district or somewhere. But
Yeah, point well taken. Go for it, Justin.
No, that totally makes sense. You brought up the Golden Knights. You can see their fan base is especially passionate. I want to shift to Kate Martin and just her. I think she's one of the best stories in the W that has not gotten mainstream attention. I've been shocked by this because I think it's a phenomenal story from the WNBA draft to now, and just how Asia Wilson has taken her under her wing. Can you kind of talk about her evolution from being the first day in training camp to now, and kind of what you think her ceiling is, not only on this team, but just in the W overall?
I mean, I'm super surprised by how quickly she's progressed and how quickly she became like a key member of the bench. She was really, like, in my eyes, one of those players on the border of even getting cut in training camp. Obviously, Becky never saw it that way, and she was probably always safe. But when you put her in the game, she's kind of being molded into like taking the Alicia Clark role once Alicia Clark moves on. Because Alicia Clark's 36, 37 years old now. She's a few more years left in the league. She's really molding and has taken Kate under her wing to like, be that sixth player of the year off the bench. Like, she's really, they called her the glue at Iowa. And that's really what she is. And she also uplifts the team. And I think that fits well with the Aces culture, because the Aces are like, it's a really uplifting culture, as you've seen with Asia. Like, they love hard, and they obviously embrace Kate hard too.
Now that's really incredible. So I want to get your opinion on this, Will, because you cover this league in depth. You're not one of these talking heads that they're just talking about the WNBA. They don't know what they're talking about. You cover this league specifically, and I want to get your opinion on just this whole discussion on Caitlin Clark in this rookie class specifically, and I guess this storyline that I think is pretty ridiculous of a lot of these rookies have to be grateful for the league to be successful. And I just want to try to understand with these newer pundits, not necessarily fans, but just these pundits that are driving kind of the mainstream discourse. What exactly do they want these players to do in regards to Caitlin Clark? Do they want them just to fold and just forfeit these games? Like, I don't understand like really what they want, because I'm just confused, because what I have followed this league specifically this season, they have been grateful about Caitlin Clark. Just have nothing but great things. Typical athlete talk. There's nothing to really see here. But I just think this narrative of just a lot of these players being bitter and jealous is just kind of like, how is this relevant? It's sports. Like, athletes, they have emotions and they're going to compete, and it's just not really business as usual. But I just think so far this season, this narrative has kind of dwarfed what has been a really phenomenal season with lots of great storylines. But yet this kind of mainstream discourse has kind of been different than what we talk about in other sports. From your perspective, since you cover this league specifically in depth, what has it been for you? Has it been frustrating? Has it been just ignoring has covered the league? What has kind of been your opinion so far this season overall?
Well, the discourse has obviously been incredibly frustrating, just knowing how many incredible women have been in this league for so long. And of course, Caitlin Clark is bringing in never before seen attention, unprecedented attention. But you can't expect a league full of the top competitors in the world to just bow down and say, we're going to take this. Like, they're going to go hard at this girl. Diana Taurasi has gone hard at every rookie. You should have seen the stuff she was doing to Kelsey Plummer rookie year. This is a league full of dogs, and I don't think people realize that. People who didn't watch the WNBA for years, this is a more aggressive league than WNBA, full stop, or than the NBA, full stop. They go way harder. There's way less referee involvement. There's way less calls. Like, they're going hard at each other, and I don't think people realize that. And obviously, when you get these racial narratives in play and these political narratives and these bad faith actors that see a typical flagrant foul. It was a flagrant. Yeah. Was it a malicious flagrant yesterday with Angel Reese? No, it wasn't. But you're going to have Barstool and Outkick and all these people reposting this stuff like it was an attack on Caitlin Clark. And I think it's quite frankly dangerous for people like Angel Reese and Kennedy Carter. Like, the rhetoric they have to see in their mentions. Like, have they been picture perfect? No. Do they deserve to have the most vile human creatures in their mentions 24 hours a day? Also, no, not at all.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if you've seen the same thing, because it seemed like with the Kennedy Carter incident, there was, I think the most blowback that we've seen to this point. And then it seemed like over the weekend, I did see some sides, even from, some of those sources you mentioned that maybe are sources that in the past have tried to dunk on the WNBA or however you want to put it, put ridiculous content out there just based on that and not really talk about the sport. But it did seem like it kind of split some of the sports watching population that is willing to be honest about the sport, because I do think you see two very different looking fouls on there between those two cases.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And it's an issue of, are you really going to be intellectually honest, or are you going to keep, driving that outrage? So I don't know if you saw any kind of like dividing line like that.
No, I did. It was definitely not the same discourse as the Kennedy Carter foul a few weeks ago. Like, there was obviously some people that have had horrible takes on this whole thing that had pretty fair takes about what the foul was. So I'm not super mad at that. I'm more so mad at like the bad faith actors and like political trolls and like people who aren't watching this league to begin with, who never watched this league to begin with, and are probably not watching it now. They just see Caitlin Clark as this messiah for their views and who they want to represent, and they say, "Oh, we're never going to watch the league again if something doesn't go their way." And quite frankly, I don't think 80% of these people are watching these games in the first place.
I co-sign that. I agree.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, and I do find it shocking too that there's like this expectation for Caitlin Clark to just dominate coming into the league immediately. I mean, we saw like even Michael Jordan, the great one himself, he wasn't winning titles year one. Obviously, these players have like a hero's journey that builds up typically to that point. It's pretty rare that you get the Magic Johnson, get to the Lakers with Kareem and win a title your first year.
Yeah, I mean, the landscape of this league nowadays just doesn't allow for a Candace Parker type of story like we saw in 2008, where she came in and just put up unreal numbers and won the MVP. It's a way harder league. And I think, like a lot of pundits, you're seeing them take their frustration out of. They kind of had like this expectation that Caitlin Clark, like people who don't watch the league, they kind of had this expectation that Caitlin Clark was going to go in and completely dominate, and it was going to be easy. And they didn't expect this pushback from players. They didn't expect it to be hard on the court for her. They didn't expect it to be as physical for her. And they're seeing this now, and I think they're kind of channeling their frustration toward the league and saying, because they're not getting what they want out of the league, they're kind of saying, oh, the league is on a bad path, or the league is going to lose viewers because they themselves aren't getting the Caitlin Clark engagement or the content that they're looking for, which is dominance out of her.
Do you think this discourse that we're having right now is all like positive progress? Long-term speaking, it's going to lead to actual discourse about the games themselves rather than this? Or do you see just kind of a loss of interest in some of these ratings pulling back slightly, even if there is still forward progress? Like, I guess, in like a year or two, is this just kind of part of the regular sports cycle for this time of year? Or, are we still looking to drive outrage?
I think there's two people in the Caitlin Clark fan base camp, or maybe even more than that, but two main segments. Is the people who really genuinely appreciate her as a basketball talent and a basketball player and what she brings to the sport and the eyes she brings to the sport. All amazing. And then there's the people that obviously, like we said, see her as this messiah or a pariah for their views, and they don't see her as anything more than that. I think those people, they're going to go to the next political thing they can go to latch on to their views. The people who really stayed here and came here for Caitlin Clark and came here to watch the league and the growth of the league and what she's presented, I think they will stick around. And I think the WNBA will see that growth. Will it be as monumental as it is now going forward? No. But I think they're going to see a big enough increase in viewers year by year from 2020 to 22, like they're going to see a big enough increase upon that where, yeah, you can obviously point to the Caitlin Clark era and say she brought that in.
From a basketball standpoint with Caitlin Clark, I have been very observant about kind of the coaching of this team. I mean, from your perspective of the Fever specifically, is there anything unusual about what she's going through from a coaching perspective? Or do you think, hey, they had a rough schedule, some of their players have been out, they got that little bit of a rest, they're back, they're clicking now, I think they got back-to-back wins. Is it kind of like we should just let the season play out more? Or do you think there's a little bit more of some red flags in regards to how this team is ran?
Well, if you saw me roll my eyes there a little bit, that's just because the narratives on this coaching has been exhausting. It was bad coaching at the beginning of the season, no doubt about it. But after she took those subs out a couple of weeks ago, I forget what game it was exactly, but she took Caitlin out of the game when she was in foul trouble, and she didn't put her back in for the rest of the game. After that, something clicked with the Fever, and they're looking like a team that can go to the playoffs right now. They're not going to win the finals, but they look like a team that could get that 7th or 8th seed and compete. And you can't say Christy Sides is completely doesn't deserve any credit for that, because she did change a philosophy. She did make a change, and it's worked. So
that was an excellent point. From an Aces perspective, that's going back, we've seen the Liberty and Connecticut Sun. We've seen the Mercury on the rise. The Seattle Storm also look good as well. What are the teams that are kind of standing out to you this early into the season, and what are kind of the potential roadblocks do you think the Aces might face just from kind of the top tier of kind of the W overall?
Well, I think everyone in that top 4 is going to be a roadblock for the Aces. I have very little confidence for them against Seattle, against Minnesota, against New York, or against Connecticut. I mean, the Lynx are probably my team that I think is going to be the team that faces the Liberty in the finals. I think the Liberty are all but locked in. I mean, they're the best team in the league. The Sun have a better record right now. I don't care. The Sun have had an easy schedule. The Liberty are the best team in the league. They're going to be in the finals. I think it's going to be against the Lynx. They have the deepest team. They have Kayla McBride, who's been absolutely insane from three-point range this season. Nafisa Collier, an Olympian, top 3 MVP candidate to this point. So I'd say probably Lynx, Liberty, the Liberty taking it.
Will, got to ask you one more question from me, at least. With what we've discussed about Vegas as a great sports city, there are people out there saying it's all but a done deal that an NBA franchise would come to Vegas if there's an expansion. How do you see Vegas as a fit for the NBA? Is it pretty easy to plug and play an NBA franchise in there? How do you see the NBA, and do you see it as a likely thing?
I think it's likely. I think from what I've heard, it'll be like 2030-ish that happens. Mm-hmm. And I think the city will embrace it just like they did the Aces and the Knights. This is a basketball city. Like before the Knights were here, this is a basketball city first and foremost. You had the Lakers who would come here in the summer. You had Summer League that's been here since, I believe, the late 90s, early 2000s, if not. This is a Lakers city, and I think they want a team here. Like we're kind of – Vegas it used to have this Los Angeles sports identity where Vegas was just an extension of Los Angeles. And obviously in the past decade, we're Vegas now. Vegas is here. So I think you want 4 major teams here.
Do you think it'll be, once that happens, an estimate of 2030, do you think that NBA squad would be the number 1 team within Vegas with all the hype? Like, where do you kind of see logistically? I know it might be an unfair question, but do you assume they play in T-Mobile Arena? Do you see them kind of doing kind of their own thing? Like, where you kind of see in terms of like the first year of how this team's going to be laid out, how you think?
From everything that's been reported, they're trying to build their own arena for when they make the move, which, I mean, I've always kind of thought is a bit unnecessary because T-Mobile Arena is a fantastic basketball arena, great hockey arena. And, I mean, if that's going to come from public money, that's going to be a whole nother thing for a whole nother podcast. But, yeah, I mean, the city will embrace them. They'll fit right in. Obviously, like I said before, it's a basketball city.
Gotcha. Well, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Can you please let our audience know where they can find you on social media and any other projects you're working on as well?
Yeah, just follow me, Will Despart, on Twitter and Instagram. Just write my name right there, WILLDESPART. I'm with the Sporting Tribune, obviously. We cover sports in Hawaii, Las Vegas, and Los Angeles, and I'm biased, but I think we do a fantastic job. So obviously follow us and stay tuned because we got a lot of great stuff, a lot of fight night content like you see from combat sports, motorsports, basketball, football, everything. So we do it all. So
awesome. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys.